Hello, Mr. Daldis here to read with you Chapter 13, Section 2, The Renaissance in the North. As the Renaissance began to flower in Italy, Northern Europe was still recovering from the ravages of the Black Death. But by the 1400s, the cities of the North began to enjoy economic growth and the wealth needed to develop their own Renaissance. The Printing Revolution. An astounding invention aided the spread of the Renaissance. In about 1455, Johann Gutenberg of Mainz, Germany, printed the first complete edition of the Bible using a printing press with movable type. A printing revolution had begun that would transform Europe. Before the printing press, there were only a few thousand books in all of Europe. These books had been slowly copied out by hand. By 1500, according to some estimates, 15 to 20 million volumes had been produced on printing presses. The printing revolution brought immense changes. Printed books were cheaper and easier to produce than hand-copied works. With books more readily available, more people learned to read. Readers gained access to a broad range of knowledge, from medicine and law to mining. As printing presses were established in Italy and other parts of Europe, printed books exposed educated Europeans to new ideas and new places. Checkpoint. What was the impact of the printing press? Please answer this question before you move on. Northern Renaissance artists. The Northern Renaissance began in the prosperous city of Flanders, a region that included parts of present-day northern France, Belgium, and the Netherlands. Flanders was a thriving center for trade for Northern Europe. From Flanders, the Renaissance spread to Spain, France, Germany, and England. Flemish painters. In the 1400s, Jan van Eyck was one of the most important Flemish painters. Van Eyck's portrayal of townspeople, as well as religious scenes, abound in rich, realistic detail. In the 1500s, Flemish painter Peter Bruegel used vibrant color to portray lively scenes of peasant life, earning him the nickname Peasant Bruegel. Bruegel also addressed religious and classical themes, but he set them against a background of common people. In the 1600s, Peter Paul Rubens blended a realistic tradition of Flemish painters like Bruegel with the classical themes and artistic freedom of the Italian Renaissance. As a scholar and humanist, Rubens had a wide knowledge of mythology, the Bible, and classical history. Many of his enormous paintings portray these themes. Durer, Leonardo of the North. German painter Albrecht Dürer was one of the first northern artists to be profoundly affected by the Renaissance in Italy. In 1494, he traveled to Italy to study the Italian masters. He soon became a pioneer in spreading Renaissance ideas to Northern Europe. At the same time, his own methods influenced artists in Italy. Because of his wide-ranging interest, which extended far beyond art, he is sometimes called the Leonardo of the North. Dürer's important innovation was to apply the painting techniques he had learned in Italy to engraving. In engraving, an artist etches the design in a metal plate with acid. The artist then uses the plate to make prints. Dürer had studied engraving in his goldsmith father's workshop and perfected the technique. Many of Dürer's engravings and paintings portray religious upheaval, one of the Northern Renaissance's most powerful themes. Checkpoint. What themes did Northern Renaissance artists explore? Northern humanists and writers. Northern European humanists and writers also helped spread Renaissance ideas. Humanist scholars stressed education and classical learning, hoping to bring about religious and moral reform. Though humanist scholars wrote mainly in Latin, other writers began writing in the vernacular, or everyday language of ordinary people. This appealed to a new middle-class audience who lived in northern towns and cities. Erasmus. Making humanism popular. The Dutch priest and humanist Desiderius Erasmus, born in 1466, was one of the most important scholars of the age. He wrote texts on a number of subjects and used his knowledge of classical languages to produce a new Greek edition of the Bible. Erasmus helped spread Renaissance humanism to a wider public. He called for the translation of the Bible into the vernacular. He scorned those who, quote, don't want the Holy Scriptures to be read in translation by the unlearned, as if the chief strength of the Christian religion lay in people's ignorance of it, end quote. To Erasmus, an individual's chief duties were to be open minded and to show goodwill towards others. As a priest, he was disturbed by corruption in the church and called for reform. Sir Thomas More's ideal society. Erasmus's friend, the English humanist Sir Thomas More, also pressed for social reform. In Utopia, More describes an ideal society in which men and women live in peace and harmony. No one is idle, all are educated, and justice is used to end crime rather than to eliminate the criminal. Today, the word utopian has come to describe any ideal society, often with the implication that such a society is ultimately impractical. Rabelais' comic masterpiece. The French humanist Francois Rabelais had a varied career as a monk, physician, Greek scholar, and author. In Gargantua and Pantagruel, he chronicles the adventures of two gentle giants. On the surface, the novel is a comic tale of travel and war. But Rabelais uses his characters to offer opinions on religion, education, and other serious subjects. Like More and Erasmus, Rabelais was deeply religious, but had doubts about the organized church. Shakespeare writes for all time. The towering figure of Renaissance literature was the English poet and playwright William Shakespeare. Between 1590 and 1613, he wrote 37 plays that are still performed around the world. Fellow playwright and poet Ben Jonson correctly predicted at the time that Shakespeare, quote, was not of an age, but for all time, end quote. Shakespeare's genius was in expressing universal themes in everyday, realistic settings. His work explores Renaissance ideals, such as the complexity of the individual and the importance of the classic. At the same time, his characters speak in language that common people can understand and appreciate. Shakespeare's love of words also vastly enriched the English language. More than 1,700 words appeared for the first time in his works. Checkpoint. What Renaissance ideas did Shakespeare's work address? Take a moment to answer that question. This brings us to the end of Chapter 13, Section 2. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.